Partiamo, eccoci. Allora, con questa piccola suspense partiamo.
There we are.
Buongiorno a tutti i partecipanti a questo
Good morning,
incontro
everyone.
rigorosamente, diciamo, online
Welcome
di
to
Cia
this
Agricoltori
online
italiani.
meeting organized by
Il paese che
Cia,
viviamo, no? Ma intanto
Italian
interroghiamo
farmers.
proprio sul paese che verrà, soprattutto dopo
We
l'emergenza
all
Covid. È
wonder
evidente che le
what
tematiche che
kind of
affrontiamo oggi,
country we
legate
want
all'agricoltura, al territorio, al Green
after
Deal,
the emergency,
si legano
linked to
fortemente a tutto quello che è il
the Green
negoziato
Deal, to the territory, and
europeo.
this is all related
Premier
to
Conte
European
ha
negotiations as well.
cominciato un mini tour attraverso le capitali
Prime Minister
europee.
Mr. Conte
Le prime tappe in
started
Portogallo e
uh,
in Spagna sono tappe,
a tour in
non sono
Europe.
state
He went
tappe
to
facili, diciamo i
Portugal,
paesi più vicini a
Spain.
noi e con
Those
economie
were
analoghe
the
a
easiest
quelle
one,
italiane.
countries
Questa
closer
sarà un incontro
to
molto importante
our,
perché
with similar
Conte sarà
problems
all'Aia,
that Italy is going through.
vedrà il premier
Conte,
olandese
Mr.
Rutte, che
Conte
come
will be
sapete
in
è in
The Hague.
capofila
He
di quei
will
paesi
meet
neostrugali, anche se le
President
posizioni
Rutte,
non
which is in the first line of
dei paesi
the list of those
del
countries
nord più rigoristi,
in
e quindi
Northern Europe,
ricordiamocelo,
which are
senza
a little bit more
infingimenti,
rigorous in their
un
approach and which
funzionamento del recovery
will like
fund, quindi
to
questo piano straordinario
reduce the
che
recovery
l'Europa
fund.
ha
This is
posto in campo,
extraordinary,
ovviamente ancora in
an
condizioni
extraordinary
che dovrebbero
program that
rendere
still
diciamo
has to
realistiche.
be
Quindi è una nuova
implemented
aiuta
and
che
should
a
help
nessuno sfugge che
the
questa
countries hit
partita
the hardest,
riguarda
and in Europe as
l'Italia,
well.
riguarda forse la
This has to
sopravvivenza
do,
di tutta
therefore, with
l'Unione
Italy,
Europea.
of
Quindi
course, but also
sarà
with
molto importante seguire le fasi di questo negoziato. Come sapete, la prossima
the
settimana
future of the whole
sarà
European Union.
cruciale
We will have to
con
follow the
il
negotiations
vertice
closely. Next week
europeo.
will be very
Secondo
crucial
tutti gli
with the
osservatori non
European
sarà
summit.
quello
According to
conclusivo per
many,
trovare l'accordo finale sui
this will
recovery
not be
fund,
the
però
final one
permetterà
on
di mettere le
the
basi
recovery
di
fund, to find an
un'altra
agreement
sui
on
paesi più
the
poveri.
recovery
Quello che
fund, but
abbiamo
this will
capito è che
certainly
molti
lay
paesi
the foundations of a compromise.
devono veramente fare un passo avanti, ma anche rinunciare a
All
qualcosa.
the countries should
Sicuramente
take
chi
a
guida
step
questo semestre
forward,
presidenza
but
europeo l'ha fatto capire senza
we're all
prudenza,
behind Ms. Merkel,
grazie
who
anche alla
uh, was
volontà
very clear
proprio del
for her
paese
presidency,
che
her
forse
German
potranno
presidency,
essere ridotti i tempi per trovare
to
un'intesa tra tutti. Noi
try to
sappiamo
reduce the
che
timeline to find an agreement. We know
risorse molto
that
ingenti, si parla di 750 miliardi,
we're talking about
sono stati
750
sussidi a fondo
billion
perduto,
euros. There are
seri e propri
um,
prestiti, finanziamenti a tassi agevolati da
grants, but
parte
also
tedesca, da parte
loans with
del settore
very
dell'agricoltura.
advantageous
Senza
um,
dimenticare che i due pilastri e i due capisaldi
rates. We should
dell'Europa
not forget, and of course, this has to do with agriculture
sono
as
da
well.
una
We should not
parte
forget
la
that the
digitalizzazione e la
two
connettività,
pillars of
dall'altra parte
this new
proprio
Europe
il
are
Green Deal.
digitalization on the one side, and on the other side, the new
Decisiva,
European Green
come
Deal.
posso dire,
So, agriculture
riportato subito
is
dal
central here.
presidente Dino Scanavino,
I
che
will
quando si
say
parla
a
di
few more words and then I would leave the floor
sostenibilità
to
si pone
President Scanavino. When we talk about
sicuramente la
environmental
sostenibilità ambientale
sustainability,
in
we
nata, la
cannot forget
sostenibilità
that
economica e
environmental
sociale,
sustainability
possono avere
also has to go hand in hand with
molto ambiziosi,
social
ma
and
bisogna
economic sustainability. We can have ambitious plans,
coinvolgere
but we
tutti
also
i
need
player, si
to
direbbe, tutti gli attori, no? In questo caso della filiera agricola, anche perché non dobbiamo
have
dimenticare che se la
all
filiera
the
agricola
other operators on
italiana
board,
e negli altri
farmers in
paesi
this
ha
respect.
retto,
We
diciamo,
cannot
la
forget
botta
that
sul
in
tsunami
Italy, but also elsewhere in Europe,
virus,
the farming
ma anche
sector
per questa
was in the
vicenda delle
forefront of
pandemie, non solo
um,
virose. Si parla
blocking
di
the negative effects of
determinati
the COVID
posti di
19.
lavoro a
We've
rischio
been
in
talking
tutti
about
i settori
many
produttivi
jobs at
e questo
risk in
chiaramente
all
si
the different
ripercuoterà anche sui consumi.
producing
Quindi
sectors,
vedono
and of course, this
essere
will have an
agevolati
impact on consumption.
investimenti appunto
In the
verso
farming sector,
gli
then we talk
obiettivi
about investments to try to reach
definitivi del paese.
the um,
Ci sarà molto da confrontarsi e da
different goals
trovare. Io vorrei chiudere
over the
così
next 10 years. I would like
progetti
to
e
conclude
idee
my
che possono essere
introductory
applicati,
remarks
ovviamente con le risorse,
mentioning
ma anche
ideas, projects that can be
politicamente, ma
implemented
anche
with
con
the right
grande
resources, with a strong policy
consenso,
line,
chiamiamolo
but
così, con la
also
consapevolezza
with
di tutti.
common sense.
Allora,
Let's say it
dopo
like that,
entra nel
with everyone's
merito
awareness on
il
board.
presidente di Dino Scanavino, qui do la parola.
Chia President Dino Scanavino, the floor is yours now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pancani, for having accepted to be the moderator of our initiative. This is a crucial phase indeed. The Green Deal is at the forefront of the European arena. As everywhere in Europe, also in Italy, we are coming to grips with the new CAP, moving forward with a little delay, also with the possibility to have a slowing down with the status quo. There are two projects, two big dossiers, the farm to fork strategy, but also the biodiversity strategy. Both highlight the importance that the farming sector has and should have in a system looking at greener agriculture in a more harmonious society, with a view to the relationship among citizens, the environment, and farmers, in order to be all more virtuous. Of course, we believe we are at the very heart of this exercise. We do not want to accept this challenge with a passive stance. We want to be active in our approach. And to do that, we need to move from problematic nature with a view to the current proposals with a view to the environment to a more proactive stance. Very often we hear sustainability and we what we want, we need to, I'm sorry, Chair, I'm sorry, President, we can hear a dog barking. Of course, we're talking about agriculture and rural landscapes, but we need to uh, stop the barking dog, please. So I was mentioning a holistic approach, comprehensive approach, which we believe should be taken as the leading factor here, not just a sum of little actions, but rather a strong leading approach, bringing farmers and citizens and the environment together. We need to have a cross-cutting approach. Farmers need to be at the very forefront of this approach, and citizens should contribute to this job. They should work with farmers as when it comes to new food systems, putting together the quality of life in rural areas and the quality of life in urban areas. We believe this should be the element which brings together the Green Deal project and the project aiming at developing agriculture, European and Italian agriculture. Yes, many problems have to be taken into account, but there is this need to go toward a farming sector that does not take out anything from the sector. Farmers and farming businesses need to be able to align their plans so that they wouldn't be hit at economic level. There is another strategic element, in my view. We need to be able to put the farmers at the forefront, and our moderator was mentioning that farmers need to come to grips with the environmental, social, and economic dimensions, allowing different types of agriculture in the several areas to thrive, like agricultural tourism, social farming, landscape maintenance. Everything should find its place in a broader picture. We can see that in the larger European project, and we believe that using CAP resources we will manage to be at the very first line of this project, of this process. We believe that systems should change in the chain. We shouldn't have chains as parts of a simple and a mere contractual approach. There should be much more than that. Agricultural systems should take into account the difficulties, the complexity of the local level, giving more importance to raw materials rather than just considering what comes next in the chain at retail level. So we need to go beyond simple labels when we talk about quality. Labels and certification, quality schemes need to be something guiding production, going against abuse of power. It should also reassure consumers, but also producers. This cannot be something terrifying. Just to give an example, the traffic light or Nutri-Score systems, we believe, are labeling systems, giving consumers the idea that healthcare facilities, healthcare systems are not able to control the safety of our food. This is not right. Consumers need to know that what they find, what they can buy in their supermarkets, regular supermarkets, it's safe. They just need to choose if they like it or not, and how much of it they can eat according to their status of health, rather than what the label simply says. Which is why we have a lot of interest in labeling system, on origin labeling. This is important, but we do not believe it to be fundamental. We believe it is more important to have a close relationship between citizens and producers. I would like to conclude by saying that clearly the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, is important. Steps are being made forward, and this becomes a strategic element. If everyone has within the CAP, among the different targets, the element of the MFF being able to use the resources in a virtuous manner, making it easy for farmers to cope with the bureaucracy, also on behalf of the national and European authorities, we will then be able to be the main characters of the post-COVID-19 chain. I'd like to say that the 15 billion euros foreseen by the Next Generation EU plan in order to increase the CAP budget to help the sector to get out of this crisis should not be used only in 2022, but before, in order to give momentum to the different operators of our sector in Italy as in Europe. Thank you very much to all, dear friends, dear guests, for being here, our colleagues, the members of the European Parliament. Thank you very much for being here. We believe this event will give us the possibility to debate in a different manner of the future of our sector. Thank you very much, President Scanavino. I would like to ask all the participants to please switch off their microphones if they're not speaking. We're improving our communication and our technical issues, but please switch off your microphones if you're not using it, just to avoid background noise. I'd like to highlight 2 points that Mr. Scanavino mentioned, which are important for today's debate. Resources. This has to do with agriculture, but also with other sectors. Resources need to arrive soon. We cannot stand still. this is something we cannot afford as of today. Resources should arrive as soon as possible. This is the first thing. Farmers say we are ready to do more, we're ready to play the game and give our contribution in this great new challenge, which is the new European Green Deal. Nevertheless, as we were saying at the beginning, this can only be done with our full commitment. I would like to turn to Mr. Giuseppe Blasi, Head of Department of the DIPEISR of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, the Italian Ministry, and I would like to ask him how will you help to turn this into a reality? Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman, for this possibility. I would like to thank all the participants, which I can see online. Of course, I can't see all the participants, but I would like to say hello to everyone. I would like to go straight to the point because President Scanavino closed his remarks talking about resources and how fast we can get to those resources. I would like to say something to focus on the problems we're trying to present not only to our ministry but also to the government at large, because this is something that not only the agricultural sector has to come to grips with. On the 21st February 2020, there was this summit, but then everything had to change because of COVID-19, and over the past few months, negotiations were at a standstill because of the situation. But on the 27th of May, the Commission presented a new reform proposal for the budget, which today is the topic on which everyone is working. I would like to highlight the impact of problems related to these aspects. As far as farming sector is concerned, 250 million euros for direct payments and market measures have been earmarked. So, well, first pillar, 4 billion euros as far as the 2018 proposal made by the Commission is concerned, which everyone considers to be not sufficient. So, attention is paid to the farming sector, even though the cut compared to the 2014-2020 period was rather big. But changes are arriving. There is an increase of the quota from 70 billion to 90 billion for the farming sector, so almost 30% increase, which is higher than the quota of the 2014-2020 period. And this increase is due to the extraordinary help coming from Next Generation EU of 14 billion euros. The Commission, though, thought of these extra increase, which should be used to support countries hit the hardest by COVID-19, in order for these countries to make the right investments. In the case of rural development, the Commission suggested to have this extra money for farmers and rural areas in order to implement the changes needed to implement in turn the new targets of the new European Green Deal and the new digital agenda. So these are earmarked funds. The complexity of the programming structure is due to the fact that these 14 extra billion over a period of 3 years, sorry, from 2023 to 2024, is complicated in terms of the programming period, because the Commission will ask to take stock of these money by looking at the different reports. So somehow we have to prepare to make it special programming in the programming framework. So we can't start before 2023 if we have to come to grips with this new framework. But the farming sector knows it very well. Some general thoughts on the proposal as far as our position is concerned on the budget reform next week. As I said, there will be this very important European summit called the ministers of the several member states will be there. You've already mentioned the very important negotiations, the past negotiations, trying to get to an agreement before the summer break, or in any case before the end of the year, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to give resources for a post-COVID recovery plan. As far as the CAP is concerned, as I was saying, 15 billion euros come from Next Generation EU, and we believe this to be a limited approach, a limited contribution still, because CAP over the past few months, with these great difficulties due to the pandemic, did a great deal. So this plus 2% is very important indeed. We believe that these contributions to the rural development policies from Next Generation EU is actually too small, even though we do realize that there is not a lot of margin of maneuver in during the negotiations. So everything has to be seen in the larger picture, which is why doing more can be difficult. Having said that, having mentioned the limits of the instruments in the framework of the Rural Development Plan, as far as we are concerned, as the farming sector is concerned, we mentioned something to our government, something that is not solved yet in the framework of the negotiation on the new budget, the external convergence. The Commission proposals on the 27th of May, no reference is made to external convergence, and those working in the farming sector know very well that this is a sort of a bomb that could explode any time, because as far as direct payments is concerned and the multinational dimension is concerned, with different rates, we don't really see why this should work. In this case, it is very hard to work on the percentages for the different countries. So for us, it is absolutely important to stop external convergence. Otherwise, we will have big problems. I will quickly go to touch upon the biggest changes with the move to the CFP reform, because after a few months of standing still, there were many meetings online to cope with the COVID-19. The German presidency, but also with the past council under Croatian presidency. The speed of approach is rather clear. The technical committee has already organized a bilateral meeting yesterday. Some of our colleagues participated in this meeting with our German colleagues, and we took stock of the situation. The next Council of Ministers should take place in Brussels on the 20th of July, and this will give ministers the chance to take stock themselves of the negotiation situation. What are the points that we believe should be improved with view to these exercise? Complexity. First of all, complexity is not just a word, not just a motto. Complexity of the programming structure becomes red tape. If the approach starts being already too complicated, also implementation will be complicated, and it is hard to reach the targets as we want and in the time we want. So we believe it is absolutely important that at political level, at the Council, ministers take these elements into account. The very first reflections of the Commission also show that before the COVID-19 crisis, as the SWOT analysis we sent for the implementation of our national plans took stake of that. And we have mentioned the fact to the Commission, because the implementation of these general problems actually turned to even a more complicated approach afterwards at national level. The strategic plan framework is not just a label problem, it is a real issue. In Italy, regions have a constitutional role. They are the first to have some competence, which is why we have to change the whole approach from this point of view. I would like to move quickly to the conclusions. We we have two main priorities. We would like that in the new programming period, the CAP will be stronger with a view to risk management measures. The proposal we have today proposes the same instruments of our past programming period. We would like that in the framework of direct payment, a small percentage maybe could be earmarked for measures to fight against climate change. So it's kind of a measure that gives producers the possibility to have a sort of an umbrella of a shield against natural disasters. Let's think of drought. We have lost 15 billion euros, and this has not been paid back. Let's think of the Asian sting bug. Let's think of Xylella fastidiosa, all the other plant diseases that we haven't been able to recover from in economic terms. So we would like that the CAP will be able to improve the implementation of the risk management measures. Another important thing is the reorganization of this single CMO for oil. The oil sector, olive oil sector, is a very important sector in Italy. Over the past 20 years, unfortunately, with the current single CMO, we have lost a lot in terms of profitability. Spain, for example, could experience the opposite situation. We would like that the future CMO for the olive oil sector could be similar to the wine single CMO, with support that helps to create olive groves, manage the existing olive groves better, but also to get the right support into the problems encountered. I would like to say one more thing. The German presidency has already mentioned that into the future financial framework that is possible before the summer break. We absolutely have to start speaking again with the producers world. In the next few weeks, we will organize technical and political meetings to decide what negotiation positions we should take due to the agreement that could be reached before the end of the year as far as the COP reform is concerned, but also to choose a strategic plan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to Dr. Blasi. Let's go back to some of the consideration that he was highlighting in his intervention. We're broadening our objectives to European issues, and we're doing this with Paolo De Castro. Thank you very much for being with us. I know that Paolo De Castro is an expert of farming and environmental policies. He worked for the Ministry of Agriculture and an expert of European issues. He's the head group of the S&D group of the European Parliament. Thank you very much for being with us. First of all, I would like to extend my greetings to all the participants, and thanks for inviting me to this very important occasion of discussing about the future of the CAP. And as my friend Giuseppe Blasi was saying, it is extremely important, and it's also important that the new Director General, Wolfgang Bucher, could hear us. I wish his proceedings all the best for his future, for a very delicate and important task that he will have to carry out. What are the main topics? Let's not dwell too much on the gossip within the Parliament about the different positions, the different position of Comagri and ComEnvy. You know very well that there's a debate between the rapporteur. We will try to solve the differences with all the coordinators of Agri and Envy. But there's apparently will to speed up the process coming from Germany. We reached a deal on the transition regulation that prolonged the current CAP to the end of 2022, with a deal that was reached at the last trilogue under the Croatian presidency. The Commission was against up until the end when the deal was struck between the two co-legislators. The deal could not have been anything else than a prolongation of the process for 2 more years, because the deal on the position of Parliament will probably be reached by the end of the year. I also think that the Council will do the same by the end of the year, and trilogues will start from the beginning of next year. Of course, these pieces of legislation are extremely important. The horizontal regulation, CMO, and many other very important dossiers. And thinking that trilogues could end in less than 7 and 8 months is not possible. We saw that even thanks to our experience in recent years, even when we worked very, very quickly, for example, on the European directive on competition, at least 7, 8 months are necessary. So imagining a time frame that is shorter for such a big dossier, it's not realistic. So we can say that by the end of next year, trilogues will be concluded, and this will bring about a deal by the end of the year. Then I hope that all member countries will have enough time to transpose the reform to national legislation. There are some complexities that are very complicated to deal with. We will try to do our part with the Commission. You know that we're working on simplification, on the eco schemes. That is that part of the strategic plans that could allow for a larger flexibility for member countries, so that member countries can choose the right measures and adapt the measures to their national conditions on the top of a more general European framework. This does not exclude the possibility of integrating the decisions taken at European level with the decisions taken at national level. For example, the idea of enhancing the risk management tools, for example, tools that were already innovated and modernized with the omnibus regulation that entered into force in 2018, that lowered the share of risk that can be insured to 20%, and then the regulation, the transition regulation that could be extended to mutual funds. But a further enhancement of these tools is necessary, and with the piece of legislation Parliament should vote by the end of the year, I hope, should allow us to do so. Of course, there are difficulties and problems still. Not only talking about external convergence, which was already quoted in earlier speeches, which is worrying because would transfer important resources from one member country to the others, and we're not taking into consideration the costs of different costs in different member countries. 100 euros for an hectare in Romania are very different from 100 euros per hectare in Lombardy, for example. So I think that also internal convergence is very important. I think we should speed up the process. This is necessary because there are big differences, especially in our country, and we should try to reach a deal or an agreement on such differences. Otherwise, the consequences will be too harmful for everybody, and especially this is a very important topic for those regions where the CAP is not strong enough, and compared to all the countries where farms are receiving direct payments for hundreds of thousands of euros. But I cannot now overlook the most important topic that we should deal with today. That is the topic of financial resources. I'm hopeful after listening to Chancellor Angela Merkel. I believe that we can reach an agreement. There was a proposal a few weeks ago of President Jean-Michel for the renovation of 150 billion euros for the recovery plan. But even if we can reach an agreement, there are still difficulties. Resources of the recovery plan for rural development and farming. These resources are very important, and these resources are those that allow us to, for the financial package for farming for the next program is still very important, and is compensating a few of the cuts that were proposed by the Juncker Commission. The recovery plan, we're talking about 16 billion euros. They would enter into force from 2022. We should amend this piece of legislation. ComAgri entrusted me with this task of this piece of legislation. It's very delicate. We should see a point of agreement with the Commission, and in particular with the Executive Vice President Timmermans, who still believes that such resources should be allocated to the new CAP and not to the current CAP. But the problem is that the new CAP will enter into force from the 1st of January 2023. So if we're transferring, if we're not able to transfer appropriately these resources, we're risking to lose 7 billion euros. Those 7 billion euros that should be entering into force in 2022. This is an issue that we will deal with in the next weeks and months. I really hope that there will be the availability of the Commission for the CAP budget to be balanced and equally distributed within the 7 years of the next proclamation. I like to remind to Dino Scanavino and all the friends of CIA that this is a very important topic. Of course, ComAgri is working to try to achieve a simplified new CAP. Unfortunately, the Hogan reform is very, very complex. So if we're not dealing with such complexities, our job will be even harder, and will be harder for farmers to get the funds that they should receive. Reach an agreement on the transition regulation between Parliament and Council. I hope it will be the same for this dossier, for the farmers to receive what they should receive, for the CAP to be what we expect. Then we have to add, of course, the main objective of the biodiversity regulation, the CAP, and the farm to fork strategy. Our objectives are very ambitious. We should remind that these are also positive messages for the farming sector. We reminded to Mr. Timmermans that we want a Green Deal with the farmers at its very center, with the farmers involved in the process. And we don't want to penalize farmers. Farmers should be rewarded and incentivized to go towards the right direction. We will see what happens when the Farm to Fork will be translated into a legislative act, and I hope that also in the reform of the CAP we will be able to use through the eco schemes and use the eco schemes to achieve and meet some of the requirements that were put forward by the Commission. The most important point, though, is the balance. Social and economic sustainability should go hand in hand with the environmental sustainability. The three pillars of sustainability should work together, otherwise farmers will not be able to be rightfully rewarded and will not be in the condition of meeting the condition and achieving the objectives that the European Union is pushing forward. We need to support farmers, not penalize them, and incentivize them and reward them. Thanks to all of you. I will be listening to the following part of the meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you very much. Thank you to Paolo De Castro. Thank you very much for this very interesting picture that gave us to be with us right now Laura Gea, Secretary of State to European Affairs. You have the floor. Secretary of State, you followed the speakers that came before you. You understand the situation of Italian farmers. Paolo De Castro highlighted the main points very well. We should be able to use the new Green Deal and involve all the farmers and the whole sector to tackle challenges that are daunting. Yes, farming in Italy is very important. Farming in Italy is considered a little bit differently compared to the European way of understanding farming, and Paolo De Castro is right when he says the strength of Italy in Europe should allow the Italian farming sector that is made of small and family managed farms, that the whole sector is able to be a protagonist on the European stage. We are thinking, we have been thinking recently to implement the European regulation on the framework of the national regulation, especially Regulation 234 of the national regulation. Listening to Paolo De Castro, I wanted to hear the example of the regulation on competition in Europe. It's a good example and it's very close to our job, and it's important to underline similarities. It will be important to implement a piece of legislation that would support farmers in Italy. Of course, today now we're talking about the new Green Deal, which is not only a strategy that was launched as a slogan, as a motto, that only speaks about environmental protection, but we also have to speak about growth, and that is included in the new Green Deal. Growth should be sustainable, and growth should be shared. This proposal came in a very different environment compared to what we're dealing with right now. The von der Leyen publication came roughly around last December. Of course, the situation is very different. We didn't know back then what would happen from February onward. We never thought about a pandemic. Taken how reacted now. What that we're looking at phase three. We now probably, but there is still going forward, going towards with the horizon of 2050. That's the last step. 2050 is the last step. I like to think that Italy was farsighted enough to have a strategic approach that allowed our country to take a step forward even before all the actors on the scene. So I think that Italy can show the way to other countries that are still behind a little bit with the environmental ecological transition. So we're thinking about developing plans that can be shared with countries that are still a little bit behind. This is, of course, a challenge that is dealt with by Italy. It is also waiting indications from the European Union, the first publication of Ms. von der Leyen and the Commission gave the first to how to interpret and translate the new Green Deal as a national level. Italy identified 5 areas: climate change, industrial transition, and social transition, which is a very important point. Industrial transition has to be understood as a process that could allow for the social transition to happen. We cannot overlook people and citizens in the transition. We cannot also overlook the financing measures means. It is important for our country to think about how the resources are allocated, should harmonize instruments and tools with constant cooperation and communication with the government, the Italian government, through the instruments of the conference resolution, zero dialoguing, and of course farming, one of the main points on the table is continuously discussed, because the regions are the main actors in this dossier, at least, but also is giving direction to the action of government. And then fourth and fifth point are biodiversity and farming. Paolo De Castro was saying it, right? We are in a very crucial place, living in crucial times. We are the publishing of the new proposal of Jean-Michel with 150 billions of what used to be the recovery plan. And we will have to read the details of the proposal because Italy has priorities. You know that between 17 and 18 of July, the European summit will take place, a summit that will have to reach an agreement on the recovery fund package, but also on the MFF. The proposal of Jean-Michel is important in this framework. An ambitious recovery plan that could meet the expectations of what Europe is trying to do. The MFF is important in this sense because it will have to be ambitious enough. The first proposal of the Commission was 1,100 billion euros, because a plan is necessary to understand if it should be implemented. The sector of agriculture is the main sector trying to work on the path that will lead the President Conte to the next Euro Summit. We will need to provide Giuseppe Conte with a strong mandate for policy to be at the meet the expectations of Italy as a country. Using the resources of the recovery fund will be very important, and the CEP will be one of the points in the and to meet the needs of our farmers. When we're talking about farming, we should talk about sustainable farming. Maybe it's a little bit of an empty word, but it all starts with the dialogue with stakeholders and with the territory, which is very necessary, because resources that are allocated by the European Union are very difficult to measure. We should be able to use such resources properly with proper and adequate tools and instruments in order to better exploit and use these resources and share the resources with all small and medium enterprises. Sustainable farming is important. It's fundamental. On one hand, we are resources, and on the other hand, we need to use resources properly, and we have to think about the capability of such resources to bring about changes on the territories, on the field, and that's why the dialogue with all the stakeholders is important. We are working not only on the number or the amount of the allocation, not talking about hundreds, thousands of euros, but what is needs to be clear right now. And in the dialogue with you, what is important is trying to understand how ambitious we want to be, how we want to use these instruments that are provided us, that we provided us with, and that's the job of the Italian member of the European Parliament. I remember very well the efforts that the member of Parliament Italia made last year. I believe what we said at the beginning and the initial step was on the directive on pollution, an example, a very good example of how policy can be integrated with the legislation and actuation in Italy. Thank you very much.
Grazie alla sottosegretaria Agea che sottolineava
Thank
il
you
lavoro comune che
very
oggi
much
succede per esempio
to
nel Parlamento tra
Ms.
i
Agea.
studenti italiani
This
adesso
is
diciamo
very
fino
important with a view to what
forze
has been done
governo
at
Movimento
the
5 Stelle e PD
Parliament,
hanno
also in Italy.
caneggiato adesso siete in maggioranza ma sarebbe bello che in questo discorso
PD and
tutto l'arco
5 Stelle were once
governativo
against each other. Now you're
italiano che
working
poi
together,
ovviamente si
but
rispecchia
I'm
nei
talking about
gruppi nelle
the
famiglie
past now.
politiche europee
All the
lavori in
European
maniera come
political
dire
families need to
coordinata
work
facendo più
in a
sistematico
more
magari con una
coordinated
via
manner
inclusione
in
ma
order
ci
to
auguriamo perché questo serve
do
come
things
fanno altri
better.
paesi
Maybe
peraltro
this won't be so
alla
easy, but
pratica.
we
Allora,
need to
no, peraltro era
do that
importante che lo
also
sottolineato, mi permetto di
in the
aggiungere,
future.
perché
I would like to add
e questo grazie anche all'occasione di oggi
something
delle
more.
nostre la CIA, tutta la discussione e il
Thanks to
dibattito
Cia,
sul negoziato
all
europeo per il
the
Recovery
debate
Fund
on the European
si parla appunto di risorse molto
Recovery
importanti,
Fund
una parte
take stock of
rilevante dovrebbe
important
finire
resources,
al
a
nostro
very
paese,
relevant,
vedremo appunto quale
very
sarà il
important part
computo
to
finale
go to our country,
e
but we'll
quando poi
see
si
what
dice
the final
però è molto
calculation will be.
importante che ci siano i
But
progetti
when we
per
say
queste
it is
riforme, no?
important
Per
that
quello che si deve
projects
fare,
for these
questo non soltanto è la
uh,
precondizione per convincere i
reforms
paesi più riluttanti
are
diciamo,
needed,
a
also the
siglare,
more
a firmare
reluctant
l'intesa, no? Quindi avere un
countries to
cronoprogramma,
sign an
sapere bene
agreement
cosa
should be
fare,
convinced.
dove, come e in
But
che
they
tempi.
can do that only if they know
Quindi questo
exactly what to
è
do,
un aspetto molto
when they want
importante,
to
ma
do it.
dicevo nel dibattito generale che si sente
But
anche, che si legge
in
sui
the
giornali, che si
general
sente sui media,
debate
si parla di questi miliardi
that
ma
we
non si
can
accenna a cose
follow in the
particolari. Noi
newspapers,
pensiamo sempre a
nothing is
grandi
said to
infrastrutture,
specific elements.
alla
We always think of
connettività, quindi anche alle infrastrutture
infrastructure,
immateriali,
connectivity,
la digitalizzazione di agricoltura. Invece di
non-material
dibattito generale
infrastructure,
si parla molto
digitalization,
poco, quindi è
but
importante che
not
oggi
much is said about
stiamo
agriculture
focalizzando
in
ovviamente
the
su
larger
questo e
picture.
ne stiamo capendo anche tutta
We're focusing
l'importanza.
on this today and
Allora,
we're trying to understand
vado dal
all the
neo,
importance of
diciamo,
these
possiamo ancora
elements. I
dire
would like
neo
to
direttore
go to
generale
the
della
new,
DG
still
Agricoltura,
recently
Wolfgang
appointed
Buchner, vediamo
uh,
se è collegato. Eccolo,
coordinator of the
prego,
um,
ci dovrebbe essere
Director General of DG
traduzione
Agri,
simultanea,
Wolfgang
credo.
Butcher, I believe
Pronto?
his
Tony?
name.
Hello and good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss certain issues relating to the common agricultural policy and the Green Deal. If you permit, I would like to focus on the relationship between the CAP reform and the Green Deal. CAP reform was proposed by the Commission in 2018, and as Paulo Di Castro has indicated, at the core of this CAP reform is to have a common agricultural policy that is sustainable in all respects. Economically, in terms of farms' income, for example, socially, in terms of providing affordable food, but evidently also ecologically. So this is the CAP proposal of 2018 that is now under discussion between the member states and the European Parliament, the co-legislators. Now comes in the Green Deal strategies that have been adopted in May 2020, and indeed they expect that the CAP reform will be an important instrument to deliver on the targets, on the objectives of the Green Deal strategies. Am I still there? Or did I lose you?
Sì, certo, no, posto, ok.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Do you still hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Sì, noi sentiamo molto bene.
Yes. So the question that arises now, how can one make compatible the common agricultural policy with the Green Deal targets? These Green Deal targets are, as you know, reducing pesticides, reducing fertilizer, having less antibiotics, giving back agricultural land to nature, and many of these elements. Now, the Commission considers that the CAP reform and the Green Deal strategies are indeed compatible under certain conditions. What are these conditions? Many of you have already referred to an appropriate financial budget for the CAP policy. You have referred to the 16 billion that have been proposed additionally for the second pillar. On this issue, I think we have to wait now for the MFF negotiations that hopefully will be concluded next week. So we need an appropriate budgetary envelope. But then we need other elements, and that's a plaidoyer towards the co-legislators. Co-legislators need to ensure that the key elements of the proposal, as the Commission has made it, are maintained. What are these key elements? It's about the backsliding principle. We should not get worse when it comes in particular to the objectives relating to climate, to environment, to biodiversity. To that end, we need to maintain the enhanced conditionality that ensures that the direct payments meet already minimum standards relating to environment, animal health, plant health, and climate issues. Thirdly, we need to maintain the eco schemes that are foreseen in the legal texts, and maybe we even need to ensure, and I think that's a discussion that is going on, and Paulo Di Castro has referred to it, that there might be a dedicated budget for these eco schemes. And finally, I think it's also crucially important that there is an appropriate reporting on the performance of the common agricultural policy. I think this point is often extremely underestimated. Look, just yesterday was again a report of the Court of Auditors regarding the contribution of agriculture to pollinators. And I think we need to take these things serious, but evidently it's crucially important that our policy also is able to report on achievements with respect to green objectives. And for that purpose, we need a good performance reporting. So I think, as we have concluded, through the different instruments that are in the CAP reform, and they were already referred to, the eco schemes, the agro-environmental commitment, the organic farming, all these elements will help us to address the targets that are in the Green Deal strategies. Where will they be addressed? As you know, once the CAP reform is finalized, and Paulo Di Castro has referred to the 2 years transition period, you noted that the Commission is in favor of 1 year transition period. But once this reform is finalized, member states have to come forward with their national strategic plans. And in these national strategic plans, they will also address not only the ecological priorities, but also the priorities relating to income distribution, priorities relating to other issues. And the Commission will approve then the national strategic plans. And in order to provide guidance to member states and to have a close partnership, close dialogue in working out these recommendations, the Commission will come forward by the end of this year with specific recommendations to member states, which we propose that they consider when they are working out their national strategic plans. So I think if we are all together, the Council, the Member States, the European Parliament, the Commission, are ambitious enough, we can really ensure that the future CAP will address challenges as they have been singled out in the Green Deal strategies. Thank you.
Grazie Wolfgang Burschner. Allora,
Thank you very much, Mr. Bircher, for your speech and all the best for your work on our behalf. I believe Senator Ballardi, President of the Agricultural Committee of the Italian Senate, is with us. Good afternoon, Mr. Ballardi. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. This is a very important meeting today after COVID-19. We know it is absolutely important to start talking about agriculture again. We are all clinging to agriculture, but as it was said already by other speakers before me, this is a sector which, during the lockdown phase, helped our country, every other country in the world, to stay afloat during the crisis. So it is important to recall the absolute strategic importance of this sector now, today. Of course, we also have to mention future challenges. We are going towards a new CAP with a good level of agreement, I believe. All the political families are concerned by the resources there, even though some small signals have arrived. The first signs were only very feeble, but still a little bit positive. Nevertheless, we are still worried about the future. The topics on which we have to work, of course, are the ones of climate change. This is absolutely the thing that worries us the most, and that certainly worries our farmers the most in Italy. Together with climate change, we also see a long series of problems that our Agricultural Committee at the Senate is working on. We've been working on climate change, we've been working on COVID-19. The resolution that seems to be unanimously accepted, which will come back to the Senate again, touching upon many other topics. We know the wine sector had huge problems from the economic point of view. The lockdown was terrible, but also meat consumption was down, especially for the pork sector. Now, that was something that constantly came back on the political agenda of our country. Great problems also among government regions as far as wildlife is concerned, and wildlife and farmers. These are all important topics, and we believe they are important for all the reasons we've mentioned already. The topic of the bees death toll is another issue that we've been working on. Something has been done, but we need to do more, especially with a view to future generations. All of these topics our topics we've been working on. We're talking also about something that seemed to be agreed by everyone, but then the double downwards auctions was approved unanimously with the right amendments, and we hope that we will be able to get around the amendment problem so that even with a view to these double downward auctions, we will manage to organize uh, something that has an anachronistic nature, because we shouldn't be worrying about these problems in our countries in 2020 anymore. There are many other problems, of course, that these governments need to cope with. I don't want to be just picky here, but we do need money. I don't want to complain, but we do need money. We need money, we need fresh money, new money, especially to promote products made by our country, made in Italy. And I believe President Scalvino agrees with me, because I heard what he said before. We need to do something for the quality of our products to be recognized even more. Europe is not always friendly to us, so to say, because as far as product quality is concerned, but also as far as PPPs are concerned in other countries, in third countries, farmers don't have to cope with our restrictions, and there is not the right competition, because actually these farmers have access to products that we cannot use in Europe. Our committee at the Senate has always been very cooperative. I would like to stop here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you very much, President Ballardi. Let's go back to Europe now. There should be a video message from Herbert Dorfman, EPP Agri Coordinator from the European Parliament. Please. Dear President, dear colleagues, first and foremost, I'd like to apologize for not being able to join your event today. Nevertheless, I'd like to still participate to your proceedings with this short video. Over the past few months, the agricultural sector was hardly put to the test by the crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and unfortunately our farmers are still bearing the brunt of it. At the same time, though, this situation helped European citizens to realize the importance of having a performant farming sector in Europe, which is able to supply safe and high-quality products. Only after having seen empty shelves in the supermarkets, European consumers finally realized the importance of the food supply chain, providing fresh, diverse, and especially sufficient products every day. I am convinced that this crisis will have an impact on the political debate on food safety, which will turn to be positive for us and our farmers. In order to support the supply chain, the European Parliament committed to asking the Commission to implement substantial measures to support our farmers. This is how we managed to obtain important measures such as private storage for the dairy sector, flexibility, and a higher co-financing rate at European level for operational programs in the fruit and vegetable sector, and other measures to reduce oversupply and regulate production in the wine sector, which was also hit particularly hard. Of course, there could have been more measures, as we pointed out to the Commission. More funds could have been earmarked for the sector. Therefore, I would like to highlight that we will continue to speak to the agricultural sectors, and Comagri invited Commissioner Wojciechowski to talk about the matter at the European Parliament after the summer break. In the meantime, the Commission went on working on its idea of a European Green Deal, and more specifically last month, the communication on the Farm to Fork strategy was released. I was appointed rapporteur in Camagri here at the European Parliament for these dossiers. Even though I asked the Commission to postpone the publication of the communication several times, I will work in the next few months to make sure the strategy will be a useful instrument which will effectively contribute to the European agricultural policy. A positive contribution which will help divert from those ideas that are somehow based on a superficial approach that do not reflect the real situation European agriculture is confronted with. Therefore, I hope I will have the chance to discuss with you all in order to write a balanced report which may help the farming sector, Italian and European alike. We need to stop listening to people who, with no facts and knowledge, often use our farmers as scapegoats, holding them accountable for anything. On the contrary, to acknowledge and reward the efforts of the people working in a sustainable manner the whole year round to supply us with high-quality products. Over the past few days, the interinstitutional negotiations also came to an end as far as the so-called transitional regulation is concerned. This will regulate the common agricultural policy for the next 2 years. It is an important text. Once the final vote will be taken, it will give more certainty to your sector, especially as far as the continuity of the rural development programs is concerned, which need to be enhanced also in the next years. Allow me to say a few more words on the CAP reform. Over the past few months, we had a strong confrontation with the CAMEMBI and the environmentalists that are not happy with the CAP putting farmers, the production of high-quality products, are all essential at the heart of this policy. They often only see environmental issues. I really hope that in the next months we will manage to break this deadlock and approve the regulation, giving certainty to the farming sector for the next year. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish the proceedings every success and you all a very nice day. Thanks again.
Grazie anche per questo intervento. Vado adesso dal presidente del
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to the President of COPA, Mr. Rookvid, see if he's with us.
Dear President Canavivo, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to participate, even by video, in your event. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Oh, I think it's better. Before I start, I would like to express my deepest condolences for all Italians and in particular farmers, victims of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is indeed a tragic situation, and we need to build on the lessons learned and to prepare for the recovery. Let me address some of the issues that I consider most relevant at this stage and put them into perspective. I would like to start by referring to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are still suffering the impact on this pandemic, not only in the EU, but also globally. In the EU, farmers and their cooperatives and other partners in the food chain have managed to maintain a relatively stable and abundant supplies of food to consumers despite the deteriorating markets. Changes in consumption patterns have led to major economic losses, in particular in value-added products. Nevertheless, we as farmers are committed to providing food security to EU consumers built on a proper functioning of our common single market. Also, we have welcomed the Commission's initiative, the market management package
more must be done to alleviate the impact on a number of sectors such as plants and flowers, wine, some of the speakers mentioned it, olive oil, potatoes, wheat, protected destination of origin, ham, poultry, etc., etc. The CAP provides this framework and we must use it to the fullest. But exceptional circumstances call for exceptional measures. Support must therefore come from outside the agricultural budget. I will repeat, support therefore must come outside from the agricultural budget. As we know, the CAP alone is not sufficiently prepared for crises of this magnitude, and options from outside of this framework must be considered and further investigated. In this context, the use of crisis reserve within the agricultural budgetary heating will not alleviate the market problems that farmers and their cooperatives are currently facing. For example, in Germany, yesterday there was a decrease of price of for pigs by 13 cents, and now we are by €1.47. A few months ago, we have reached €2 per kilogram. We have heard EFSA's statement indicated that food is not a vector of transmission of COVID-19. The claims that attempt to draw a link between EU agriculture and the COVID-19 ridicule the hard work that the entire value chain, national authorities and the Commission's DG Sante have invested in this area over decades. In the EU, we have the safest food, plants and animals in modern history. And in addition, all agricultural systems currently producing high quality EU produce, including livestock, must have a change to contribute to a sustainable EU agriculture. Now I would go to the multi-annual financial framework. The Commission's revised proposal for the Union's budget from 27th of May is a bit disappointing. Sorry, I'm saying that, but it's a bit disappointing. We have to recognize that the budget proposal is composed of two layers. One is the economic recovery program to extent of €750 billion for a 4-year period, and the other is the normal MFF for 2021 to 2027. On the economic recovery program, if you consider all the efforts and investments to be made to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and transition to more sustainable production methods, the amounts proposed are simply not enough. And we do not even know if and how the agriculture and the forestry sector will be eligible for the support under the Just Transition Fund. The revised MFF proposal to the extent of 1.1 trillion EU is not even an improvement on the previous package. It is, in fact, 3.1% lower than the one presented on 2nd May of 2018. The allocations for the CAP now presented are an improvement to the May 2018 package. However, if we compare it with the current MFF, we have an 8.8% reduction in support for Pillar 1 and 15% for Pillar 2. This clearly means that the EU agriculture sector will be facing future challenges and requirements with less public support. In addition, for all this occurs at a time when the sector is facing many major market disruptions, as I mentioned before. across all sectors and when there are not available funds left in the current budget. If we combine this with a very limited concrete EU-level assistance for necessary investments in agriculture, in the other policy areas such as better functioning food chain, new breeding techniques, low-risk substances and digital agenda in rural areas, the future of farming looks not really good. I will not use the word catastrophic, but it will not look really good. This is not what we have been calling for, the maintenance of CAP support in real figures. We cannot accept any cuts in the budget. How are we then expect to tackle all these challenges and respond with such significant reduction in support? For farmers and their agricultural cooperatives, it is very clear that the EU cannot afford any shortcomings when it comes to food security. The sector needs investment in more sustainable food production, ensure generation renewal, innovation and technologies, and maintenance of public support in the 2021 to 2027 MFF. All this is even more crucial in the context of the implementation of the future CAP, as well as highly ambitious farm-to-fork and biodiversity strategies. For example, a reduction by 50% of the use of plant protection products, a reduction by 20% of the use of fertilizer, and so on and so on. The outcomes will largely depend on the motivation, support, and future involvement of the actors on the ground. That is to say, farmers, forest owners, their cooperatives, and other land users. This is what will ensure the future for a new generation of farmers in the EU and guarantee safe, high quality, and nutritious food for EU consumers. We must therefore call upon member states to reach a rapid decision in the Council regarding both the economic recovery program and the future of the MFF. This is necessary to secure the economic recovery of the whole European Union. And we must also ensure that the amount allocated for the economic recovery can be used as soon as possible, and that payments for beneficiaries could be made as earlier as from 2021. Now I would like to go to the CAP, to the legislative process and transition regulations. Let me address this regulation. We have seen some 10 days ago a political agreement regarding the transition regulation. In the trialogues between the Croatian presidency and the European Parliament, this still needs a formal decision on the future MFF to be final, but it's a good signal that the co-legislators were able to reach an agreement to ensure a smooth transition for farmers across the multi-annual budgets of the Union. It was also positive that both the Council and the European Parliament agreed that a 2-year transition was not only necessary, but also realistic in view of the current political situation and decision-making timeline in Brussels. On the CAP reform process, the work on the 3 regulations, the strategic plans, the single CMO and horizontal, is progressing, but at a slower pace than we would like. However, it's necessary to recognize that the move to faster decision on the EU budget is necessary, and this didn't and has happened yet. I hope that there will be a decision under the German presidency. We have been calling for more than 2 years now for the maintenance of the CAP support, at least at the current level. Unfortunately, this is not what the Commission has presented and its revised proposal. We hope that the necessary conditions, namely the decisions on the future Union's budget, can be rapidly taken to ensure, in one hand, a smooth transition between the current and the future multi-annual financial framework, and on the other, to facilitate a political agreement on the future CAP, hopefully already during, as I mentioned before, the German presidency on the Union. I would like to make some comments on the farm to form strategy. The farm to form strategy must take into account all the three pillars of sustainability. I will point it out: the economic, the social, and the environmental pillars. Therefore, it is necessary that the commissions carry out impact assessments. These impact assessments indeed are really necessary before taking any decision on establishing targets, such as I mentioned before, to reduce the use of PPPs and the use of fertilizer and also the use of antibiotics. Agriculture and forestry can provide long-term solutions. This is why the contribution that agriculture and rural areas are making to food and feed production, as well as biofuels, textiles, and reforestation, must be recognized. Yet the current decisions often neglect these social and economic aspects and forget to include the human factor within the farmer's work. Any future strategy must follow a comprehensive agri-food chain approach and be based on independent science-based policy making. This is how we can support investment through consistency in the policy making. Let me point out, European farmers and agri-cooperatives must have access to the right toolbox to be developed hand in hand, for example, with cutting-edge scientific process. They must be given available, safe, effective, and affordable tools and alternatives. Only by using these tools we can, for example, reduce the use of plant protection products. And it's also necessary to increase public investment into research and innovation at the EU level to allow European farmers and agri-cooperatives to take the environmental sustainability on their production further. The Commission presented very ambitious biodiversity strategy for 2030. We discussed this with the Commissioner. Also, we agree that we need to increase our ambition as regards biodiversity and environmental protection. The approach proposed in the strategy will not allow, and that's the farmer's perspective, allow us to realize this ambition and the green recovery. The aim to establish more protected areas will reduce the area available for agricultural production and forestry in the EU. And we have to feed our people. We in COPA and COSHEGA would like to underline that excluding 10% of land from active use will have severe socio-economic consequences, adding to the high potential rate of land abandonment, tougher restrictions on areas that are already protected, unavailability of inputs, and the negative input of climate change. The impacts will be severe. We believe that this will lead the EU to outsource its environmental footprint. Outsource makes no sense to third countries and put pressure on biodiversity hotspots around the world, including the Amazonas region. Instead, we should focus on a win-win solution that incentivizes and promotes the adoption of measures that are productive and at the same time contribute to biodiversity. On forestry, we believe that the new forestry strategy must be the main framework to coordinate all policies related to forestry. This includes aspects related to biodiversity and prevailing role of member states, forestry policies, and the subsidiarity principle. Ladies and gentlemen, dear President, let me conclude. We farmers are facing a lot of challenges on the market. The pandemic, the corona pandemic, and so on. And because of this, decisions are needed. Decisions on the MFF. I will repeat, no cuts. Our sector needs a stable budget. We have to have solutions for the farm to fork strategy. We have to have and build up solutions for the Green Deal and to improve the biodiversity. But this will only fly, and it can only fly if the farmers, if COPA Košika is implemented. And these solutions must provide a perspective for us, for the farmers, and especially for our young generation. They have to have perspectives and they have to be competitive in the future. All these proposals will have an impact on our sector. In some areas, a negative impact. And because of this, please listen to the COPA Košika voice. Please implement us in the strategies, to farm to fork, to the biodiversity strategy, to the Green Deal, and how to create the CAP. The farmers and the countryside, we are the backbone of the EU. Please support this backbone. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie. Il settore agricolo è la spina dorsale dell'Unione Europea, ha ragione.
The agricultural sector is indeed the backbone of the European Union. Mr. Brookfield is correct. As far as local areas are concerned, as far as environmental sustainability is concerned, we have the chance to have Mr. Giovanni Cannata, President of the Abruzzo, Lazio and Molise National Park. Good afternoon, everyone. I've just activated my microphone. Thank you very much for your invitation today. Some considerations have to be made. I have listened with great interest to everything that has been said by the other colleagues about funds. And like the French say, c'est l'argent qui fait la guerre. It's money that makes war. We should probably talk about why we're making war. Rather, I believe it is easier in this phase. If we were to frame today's proceedings in a strategy Cia has been trying to implement for a long time now, the country we want, il paese che vogliamo, of course we need to bear that in mind, but there are other things that we should also recall about the linkages between agriculture, local areas, the territory, and how these intertwine with programs. The important thing in this debate today is that some reflections should be made not only with a view to financial issues or organizational issues in the wake of European organization. The debate should also go in another direction. If we manage to have these resources, what should we make with those resources? I heard interesting things about how we should use risk management measures with a view to climate change index. Fundamentally, we should try to go and check also what can be done also elsewhere in other areas. Maybe older national, maybe our is one of the oldest national parks. Our country counts on national park, 32 protected sea areas, more than 50 other regional protected areas, a very articulated system at national level, which we've been building not only with the Italian legislation, but also with the European legislation. Now, this is very important. The farming policies for agriculture or the different kinds of agriculture should be policies that are connected to other structural policies in Europe. I am thinking of the environmental policies for biodiversity and most recent text issued by the European Institute. Also, their witness if the country has a real interest to develop interesting approaches on these territories, these local landscapes. We want to get into the details now of a national or regional dimension. But as far as my personal experience is concerned, these are local labs in the larger framework of the sustainable development exercise. Bear in mind the social economic dimension we've been mentioning until now. We need to get resources, but what do we need to do with those resources? Of course, we can't talk about this today in the details, in the nitty-gritty, but I hope that there will be a follow-up after today's event. How the authorities of other countries, but also the different stakeholders at national and international level, on behalf of producers, organizations, but also on behalf of the several entities, the several political and non-political bodies, intend to work together on this planning action. Let me be clear. We need to talk about the strategic plans at national and regional level. But we also need to understand a little bit more how these strategic plans will be elaborated. What are the environmental content in these plans in order to put agriculture, local areas, and the environment together? Our friend Mr. De Castro was mentioning what has been done already over the past several months, but we need to understand what are the resources that we can use. The issue of the connection between the farming sector and rural areas, especially close to protected areas, is very important. If we even exclude maritime areas, we're talking about areas which are all along the Apennines. And there we need to understand what type of activities we want to implement. There are different declinations. National parks are, as I was saying, local laboratory and a ground where to find solution for the conflicts, the existing conflicts. Mr. Rukvid, local president, mentioned the sometimes conflictual relationship between farmers and citizens. But we need to mention also the good practices part of the evolution of a park from a sanctuary to an active partner with the quality of the environment. I would like to recall that when I say park, national park, the interpreter is sorry, but he cannot hear the speaker anymore. Wait a second, Mr. Kanata, maybe your microphone just went off. We cannot hear you. Yes, I apologize. I had touched the microphone button inadvertently. I was saying territories can change also along with how agricultural producing methods change alongside. Can you hear me now? Yes, we do. We can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you very well, Professor. Great, thank you very much. These local productions are important. The environmental Ministry for Environment, but together with other ministries, ministries of economics, etc., went to look at all the specificities of these areas in the past with a specific study. And that study bears witness to how active farming communities can be in maintain the livelihood of these rural areas, of these local areas, inhabited by millions of citizens. What do I think we need to do? We believe cultural activities have to be put into place. And I would like to turn to President Canavino now. I would like to go from the very local level here. Some kinds of work are done bottom up and some other top down, but how do the local operators implement what needs to be implemented? There is a big job to do in terms of observation. There is also a great need of listening to local needs. The institutional setting in our country, Italy, has a very important regional dimension. How does the agricultural policy lend locally? How is it translated locally? We need to listen, as I was saying. We need to look at the value of agricultural activity in different areas of the country. Let me quote just one example: the National Park of Vesuvius, a very strong human presence in a protected area. We need to set some debate tables, not for the sake of debate, but because we need to make sure that what is decided in Brussels can reach our farmers in a very fast manner. And I will move slowly to the conclusions now, mentioning something that I particularly like. We need to be able to exchange good practices. We need to have an earnest dialogue at national level, but also at European level. From this point of view, I am strongly convinced that the CAP is our basic line as a scholar, but also as an institutional representative. I believe that we need to try, if we really want to build the country we want, if we need to use, if you really want to use local areas to start to recover with a different deal, then we need, as I was saying, to give the farming sector the right instruments coming from other sectors, from the research sector, from the environment sector, but also from the healthcare sector. This was going to be known as our used the word holistic, comprehensive. I would like to take this word and build upon it, think about a system, bearing in mind some choices. I also said it at the beginning of my speech. The plural dimension is important. Agriculture, local territories, local areas. We need to conjugate the international European dimension with the local dimension. This is the fruit of cooperation among operators, professionals, politicians, representatives of the different confederations, because this is the only way to cope with the multifaceted dimension that we have to work with. Unfortunately, we have lost a very good connection with Mr. Kanata as well. Again, how can we bring nature back to agriculture as well? We believe that nature has always been in agriculture, has always been part of agriculture. What we need to do, unfortunately, connection with Mr. Kanata is discontinuous again. We need to be realistic. Resources for the medium term will arrive, but are we ready to do something with them? And what do we want to do with them? Thank you very much for your invitation again. Thank you very much once again, President Kanata. You offered many different elements of reflection, a lot of food for thought. Now, going back to sustainability again and climate change, I would like to go to Lorenzo Carese from our Higher Institute for Environmental Protection and Research. He mentioned the fact that it was the hottest year since 61, which I recall very well because I was born in that year. Yes, indeed, there was a very hot year. This is linked to many other environmental problems that I've tried to bring to your attention with a view to different systems, different agro-environmental systems. Let's move to the next slide, please. Before 2020 became the COVID-19 year, it was supposed to be the biodiversity year at the national level. Why? Because 2020 was supposed to be the year to implement the Paris Agreement with a view to the actions aimed at slowing global warming down or having a positive trend, recovering also biodiversity. IPBES is the maximum international scientific authority in this respect, which published a report around in the whole world. It was mentioned in the press, in the media. We are living the sixth and biggest species loss, extinction since the loss of dinosaurs. And in the frame of a couple of decades, we may lose even more. But we are losing biodiversity, and this is very bad because, first of all, every species has the right to exist, but also the well-being of humanity. Why? Because when this living network, this living library is reduced, the national economies go down and agricultural economy goes down as well, because agriculture is among the economic sector certainly the one that bases its well-being and its existence the most on biodiversity. When we talk about protecting biodiversity, we're not only talking about biodiversity in itself. These IPS report, together with other reports, as the one published by the Environmental Agency of the United Nations, says that agriculture is the main factor for biodiversity loss. I am sorry I had to recall this, but this is what scientific research demonstrates. And scientific research says that agriculture needs to become an ally in this approach. It is also recalled by the European Strategy for Biodiversity in order to allow biodiversity to be reconstructed. The disturbing factors, if I may have the next slide, please, are linked to the destruction of habitats. This picture is a very eloquent example. This is a picture taken in the Mato Grosso, where every year hundreds of thousands of hectares of woods of natural areas are turned into crops producing yields used in the feeding industry. Agriculture, from these points of view, is a strong pressure factor and a strong decline factor for biodiversity at the global level. Of course, there are other elements such as the pollution of soil and waters, the arrival of the basic species, alien species, but there is also a link with climate change, of course. Next slide, please. These might be a little bit of a cryptic graph, but I would like to use it to illustrate the very important role that the farming sector has at global level on outcomes, not only biodiversity, bio networks, but also the phosphorus and nitrogen balances in water reservoirs, which are very important in the reproduction for the trees of agricultural production. Please move to the next slide. We have a list here, the 5 main goals set by the framework agreement for biodiversity I was mentioning in my speech on in February in Rome. And we discussed so which role of agriculture, as I was saying before, agriculture is must be an ally in the biodiversity revolution. Please, next slide. This is an application by Rockstrom in 2020. This is just a basic code. It says that this transformation does not need to happen at a slow pace, but should be much faster. The transformational change, this radical change, should adapt to the national circumstances, the national situations that we are going through, and it has to focus on the agroecological features of each country. Let's move to the Italian situation now. This is the best indicator to represent the level of stability of Italian farming. The picture on the left says that over the past 40 years, we have lost 150 million hectares of agricultural land, which is not used anymore for agricultural production. These surfaces became forest, positive elements contribute to nature, and we have gained something here, but there are also some negative elements to be taken into account. The bad news here is that part of these territories, these lands lost by agriculture, became infrastructure, buildings, and this is a very important thing because this soil cannot be brought back to agriculture anymore, at least not at affordable cost. And I believe this is an underestimated problem in Italy. The self supply dimension is very concerning. In Italy, 18% of our supply depends on imports. So losing agricultural land to cities, so in our valley, which should be very fertile, is a problem we have come with in the future. And we should try to limit these problem as much as possible. To the next slide. I'll try to summarize the transparent and all the indicators of the Italian agricultural sustainability. Some arrows go up and down and are positive signals. The emission in agriculture, for example, of greenhouse gases emissions, and also the added value of agriculture. And there are some red arrows very concerning the increase of nitrogen emissions, more things of fertilizer. There are some positive and negative signals with social, environmental, and economic sustainability of Italian agriculture. And there is a very positive element concerning organic agriculture here. Please, let's move to the next slide instead. Thank you very much. These graphs help us to recall something that has already been mentioned today. Climate change has different forms. Sometimes we see it in the increase of global temperature, catastrophic events, but also reduction of agricultural yield. Some countries are winning, others are losing, but agricultural production decreased simply because of the temperature increase we've been experiencing so far. Of course, also other factors. This is the main factor that needs to be taken into account by the different policies to guarantee the sustainability of the agricultural sector as well. Let's move now to organic farming. And this is certainly a story. In Italy, over the past 30 years, organic farming went from 0 to 2 million hectares, 75,000 farms, small farms, medium-sized farms, managed by men, young women who have no agricultural background. A lot of innovation, a lot of freshness, a lot of regeneration is brought by these operators in a sector that sometimes is suffering from loss of new generation. These are positive results, and they say that organic farming has a very strong positive effect on the genetic pool, on the quality, the general quality of landscapes. The only problem related to organic farming, together with other different diversified farming systems, is the so-called yield gap with a view to conventional systems, which bring many to believe that we have the problem of feeding 10 billion people by 2050, and we will not be able to do this with the conventional system. There is another element to be taken into account. Please just move to the next slide. Calling the role of research before Professor Canate. We need research. Why? Because a great portion of the production gap stems from not having invested enough in organic farming. Let's move to the next slide, please. I hope that you can see my point here. This gap is naturally reducing because a good amount of farming surfaces, also Italian farming surfaces, we have managed to traditionally for many years are losing their natural diversity. But in organic farming, we see an upward trend in terms of yield per hectare, thanks to the experience and knowledge that have spontaneously been brought into the sector without the help of public research. Uh, the problem that we've been trying to fix with research programs of Horizon Europe and the fast track for research in the organic sector that will improve and will certainly support our need to reduce the yield gap.
On the last slide, I would like to say a little bit, a small reasoning. In last May, there were two strategies that were published: the strategy Far to Fork and the biodiversity strategy for 2030. These two strategies are the two fundamental pillars of the Green Deal. There are many points in common between these two strategies. One is conserving and protecting biodiversity, and the other one is sustainability of farming. Here I tried to list the main point of the two measures that were published. First point is organic farming. Again, on this point, the target that was set in both strategy said that by 2030, European Union should reach 25% of land farmed under organic farming strategies. Right now, we're at 15% for organic farming. We should reach 25% by 2030. Yesterday, we concluded a study just before this meeting, and our estimate with our colleagues concluded that in order to obtain this objective, we should convert 100,000 hectares per year to organic farming. This would allow us, imagining the slow decrease of arable land in a few years, to reach 3 million hectares and thus reaching the target of 25% of usable farming land. Of course, this will need a strong cooperation between the Ministry of Environment and Agriculture, CREA, ISRA, and all the institutions that deal with these issues to better understand what are the species and where to better focus in order to transform farming in a way of producing that is more respectful of the environment and sustainable. In Italy, the target 25%, 100,000 hectares per year, would allow Italy as a country to reach more easily all the targets that are set by both strategy. For example, the reduction of 50%, the use of chemical PPPs and those and the risks that are related, and reducing 50% the most hazardous pesticide. On the pace that we're going out right now, we're kind of halfway through our objective. Also, the reduction of nitrates and phosphate fertilizers. We've done some sampling recently, and in 3 out of 4 samples, we detected high rates of concentrations of nitrates and phosphates in the soil that we studied. These are two strategies that are very clearly set with specific targets by these two strategies. These strategies indicating clearly what is the path that we have to follow in order to recover from the crisis and to imagine the country that we have. I would like to extend my congratulations to President Scanavino for the initiative and for inviting me. The title is very, very topical, very interesting, and also to answer to Professor Cannata. This is the road that we have to follow. He was asking himself and ourselves very rightfully how to spend the resources that we have. This is the road that was set by European Union. This is the road that we should follow, and that indicating that agriculture, farming, and biodiversity are not two opposed concepts. There's no difference and a dichotomy between the sustainability of farming and protecting biodiversity. This is the road that we have to follow. I really hope that all the actors involved could cooperate, dialogue between each other, and put every effort possible. Just going back to the first draft of the framework directive for biodiversity, the role of government is fundamental. Conserving and protecting biodiversity needs the cooperation of all governments, and also the role of society, civil society, enterprises, unions. Everybody needs to be involved. We need to take rapid decisions, immediate decision to go towards the best direction. Thank you very much to Lorenzo Ciccarese. Before the conclusions of this proceedings that were very, very dense, and before the conclusions, I would like to give the floor to Scanavino that has something to say very briefly. I want to give the floor to Rosa Giovanna just afterwards. First of all, I would like to thank everybody, and also the foreigner guests that had a few problems with the translation. We are sorry for that. But I would like to underline a few of the most important concepts that I've heard this morning. First of all, the need of using properly the resources that are available to us. First of all, trying to imagine to be far-sighted, imagining the future. What do we want to do? What kind of environmental and farming system do we want to have in the future? How do we want to communicate the job that we're doing and the effort that we're putting in this? How do we want to understand nature and our impact on it? We should try to understand that development is made up of innovation, research, digitalization, information technology, all the instruments at our disposal that we have to use properly and with great care. This, of course, has an influence on our behaviors, on the markets, on the ability to communicate. And lastly, one last thing that I would like to add, the need to enhance and strengthen the single European market. Single European market controls competition within the European system and makes us stronger outside Europe. Borders are at the borders of the European Union, not of our single countries. That is very important, and that is what also has been said by Angela Merkel recently and the Commission. I think we can give our contribution to our country, to the European Union, doing our job every day. Thank you very much. We go to the conclusions. Mrs. Castagna, President of CIA Sicily and part of the presidency of CIA Italy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the speakers and the guests and all the participants to the proceedings of this morning. With great interest, even if connected from far away from internet. I would like to go back to the title of our project, the country that we want to have. We should start from the idea of country that we want to have in order to think about the future perspectives that we can have for future projects and the challenges that we're facing with a view to the new CAP and the new strategies announced by the European Union. we are worried sometimes because you can see a very virtuous project of cooperation between environmental and farming uh, systems, but all this weight cannot be borne by only farmers. The complexities that we already see clearly, as a member of parliament, De Castro was saying, the difficulties that we're facing and the complexities of the CAP are clear. We cannot make regulations and legislation even more complex than they already are. What is worrying us is the fact that we have to build a beautiful project that can take into consideration sustainability, environment, agriculture, etc. But we do not have right now impact assessment that can show us the impact that these strategies will have on farms and producers. For example, the point of animal welfare, very important point. Of course, we can focus and try to improve conditions and welfare and health of animals, but this weight cannot be put on farmers' shoulders only. Most of the farms that we have in our countries are family managed with a small number of livestock. We're talking about huge issues that have to be dealt by countries, by governments, and cannot be tackled single-handedly by farmers. We need to understand and to have very clear how sustainable, how doable are these projects, and for them not to be too heavy on farmers' shoulders only. My example was on animal husbandry, but we can make examples on other sectors, of course. We said that it would be important, and it already is, to put a lot of importance in the CAP to the respect and defense of the environment. But we also have to think about the economic sustainability of farms. The CAP is made for farms, for farming enterprises. Of course, farmers are ready to do their part and to put their effort in order for the objectives to be met. But we cannot think to be able to meet the requirements and achieve the objectives that were set only through farming and CAP funds. Because the wealth and the well-being that we are creating through our activities, then it's spread all over society, the citizens as a whole. The interaction with territories is fundamental. Mr. Kanata was mentioning this earlier. If we think about the territories where all different farms and activities act, we have to take into consideration the importance of those farms and those territories to the sustainability of our country, not only the economic sustainability, but also other aspects of sustainability. If those farms, if those activities die, if those farms cannot sustain the economic environment of those territories, then those territories will be left alone and will be a weight, a burden for the whole country. And when I say country, I probably mean the whole European Union. Territories in the European Union are different one to another, but we need to state that the CAP has to take into consideration the differences between different territories. It is true that there is a constant dialogue with region, but we need also a constant dialogue with farmers, with our organizations, and the role in general of organizations. That's what we do. We speak to farmers and we try to understand their difficulties and their worries and what is important for them. Ms. Jaya was saying that earlier, we're not talking about funds and €1 more, €1 less. What is important is how we spend those funds. But what we need to do is having a clear project and how to use the resources. Once we have that, then we can speak about the amount of funds that are allocated. I'm underlying a point that was already mentioned. The next generation funds cannot be allocated starting from 2023. Farms are struggling right now, in this very moment, and despite all the difficulties, the farm sector managed to provide the European citizens with safe and healthy products. Farmers are still dealing with the emergency. We really hope that we won't have to deal with another emergency in the future, but this should make us understand clearly that we cannot wait 2023 to solve problem or the emergency that we're dealing with right now, because by 2023 the situation could be completely different, or some farms could not even be survive until 2023. Of course, we haven't dealt with all the topics that should have been dealt with, but what I want to underline right now is the importance of consultation, of dialogue, and communication with territories, of course, but that has to take into consideration organizations that most of the time can give and propose solutions to the problems that we're facing, and also are the reflection of the needs, the real needs of the people on the field, in the farms. And we know very well what could be the proposal that could allow us